Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talk About It Tuesday. I'm Tosca Di Matteo, your host, and I'm excited to have you here. I'm going to be talking to Alex Suchman today about the power of play at work, which is why, hey, Alex, which is why I've got my hat on, because it's time to have a play date while working with Alex. For those of you who are new to my platform, I bring diverse perspectives and experiences to the table to have conversations in pursuit of helping you live your best life, in pursuit of becoming an even better leader, and your own personal development and healing journey. So I'm so excited to have Alex here, and I'm going to bring her on now. Let's see if this worked. Sorry. I was like, oh man. Let's see. Are we, is this working? Accept. Whoa. All right, I'm inviting. Sorry, I've also got, all right, is this, sorry guys. I'm inviting Alex here to join. Is it working? Alex? Sorry, I also have something else going on. There was a fireman that just came in the apartment. Everything is fine, but now like my WhatsApp is blowing up. Oh, it says Alex is unable to join. I don't know.
There we go.
There we are. Okay.
Oh my goodness.
Wow, that was like a process. And in the meantime, I've got like WhatsApp blowing up because like there was like firemen here. Wait, hold on one sec. I gotta like, all is well, folks. It was for the neighbor. All right.
What an eventful day.
I know. It's just, okay. Anyway.
No, that early part was my error. I got a new phone last week and hadn't yet set up Instagram to like connect to everything. And there's too many things to do when you get a new phone. It like keeps getting harder.
Oh, I know. It's like you need a PhD just to figure out how to set it up. It's nuts. Anyway, okay, sorry. All that, and we've got Aisha here from School of the Arts.
Awesome.
Chiming in here saying hi. Okay, sorry. Woosah. All right, so I'm wearing this crazy hat because we're talking about
it. Love it.
bringing play into work. And first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to come on this platform, share your story and your passion with this audience. I'm so excited that we got connected after all these years of experiencing the same high school and our love of the arts. And I'm just so thrilled to have you here because I love who you are and what you're doing in the world, and I just want to be a part of it in any and every way that I can. So
it's totally mutual. And I have told so many people, I'm like, you hear me talk about how much I hate social media, but I've made like a genuinely amazing connection with someone who I vaguely knew in high school, and I think it's such a cool story. So
yeah, me too. And the story is yet to be written. We have so much that I think we're gonna be able to do together, and especially this conversation today. So I think I feel kind of ridiculous because I can clearly see myself on this thing. It's okay. Ridiculous is good. I'm gonna go with it. So yeah. So what I usually do is have my guests introduce themselves because I couldn't do, it justice. So just if you wouldn't mind, share with the audience, like, what of your life experiences has kind of made you who you are? What's your story? Like who is Alex Suchman?
I mean, that could go pretty deep, but I have always been somebody who loved to help other people. I've always been fascinated by other people, wanted to hear their stories and get connected with them in some ways. I have a lot of friends who I've known for 20, 30, even 40 years. You know, I just, relationships are so important to me. And as I've navigated my career, have always been looking for the right way to help people, the right venue and the right subject matter. And it's very funny. I never ever thought that I would have a company that created games to use in the workplace. But now that I'm here and looking back, everything lined up to that. For the first 10, 12 years of my career, I was in the public health and public policy space and loved that, but felt like it was very removed. You're making recommendations for things that might happen a couple of years down the way and were affecting thousands or millions of people, which was cool, but I wanted something a little bit more direct. And I actually then shifted to focusing on operations and leadership development and sort of building internal infrastructure in companies, because what I found is you have really smart, really talented people with great visions, but they kind of tie their own shoes together on a day-to-day basis and don't realize it. And I love that level of like, oh, this person's really stressed about this aspect of work, or these people are having a hard time figuring out how to structure this project or structure this meeting, and I can help. I know how to do that. And then from there, I got very interested in how hard human relationships are at work, and how the modern workplace is just not set up in a way that lets people connect in ways that are biologically and evolutionarily craving to connect, to have relationships, to build trust, to understand how we can help each other and how we're connected to each other, and to problem solve in a creative way. And I always, when I was doing consulting, when I was doing workshops, would always try to make it a very interactive experience and make learning really interesting and experiential. And when I got the idea to start using games and met my now business partner about how to use games, we realized the power of shared experience in learning about yourself, in learning about other people, and in using the game experience as a catalyst to start talking about some really challenging and really deep interpersonal dynamics, starting from just personal preferences. I would rather read all the instructions before we start playing a game, and you just want to dive in and figure it out as we go. And that can create a tension from the very beginning. But likely those tendencies show up at work as well. And so how do you, once you understand them and can name them, how do you navigate them? And I get to be creative, I get to help people, I get to play, I get to watch people have fun. It seems like the best of all worlds.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm so excited to dive in to this topic, but I do want to go back a little bit to, the shared kind of experience going to an art school and having an appreciation for what that brings to our life and the richness. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about what was it like because I think we went to School of the Arts in Rochester, New York, and I think art schools, whoop, whoop, go Seahawks.
Silverhawks.
Silverhawks, right, Silverhawks. What am I thinking? And I think that's like a unique high school experience, to have the opportunity to take arts classes, and be in an environment that was just very artistic and diverse in every sense of that word. So what was that like for you, going to a high school like that, now that you can, in retrospect, kind of appreciate that it was kind of unique?
It was so unique. I think about that so much. The biggest thing that jumps out to me was that because it was an arts magnet school, and like in college, everybody had to have a major. And you're right, it was so diverse. I mean, I think it was maybe 30% white students, 30% African American students, 30%, every totally mixed, socioeconomically mixed, religiously mixed. But the first thing you knew about any person was what their arts major was, and just what that did for identity. It was, you'd be like, oh, those are the singers over there, or those are the creative writing people, or the tech people, or the dancers. And having that be an identifier, that something people chose for themselves or chose to identify with, that I think made a huge difference. And especially talking with friends who went to other high schools, even at the time, was very aware that there wasn't really a popular crowd at Soda. It was sort of like anyone could be popular because everyone was into different things and everybody appreciated that. The other thing that really jumps out, and just in general, why I think arts education is so important, is when you're studying the arts, you have to look for what's invisible. You're literally looking at what's not already in existence. Whether it's an image that you have on in your mind that you're trying to recreate physically, whether it's making sounds with your body, and whether through your voice or through an instrument, and trying to fill the air with music, whether it's through movement. And you have to be somewhat more intuitive, and be able to tap into intangible sources of inspiration. And I think because of that, I mean, that's what creativity is sort of making something out of nothing, or taking a bunch of pieces and putting it together in a way that hasn't been done before. And it's such a powerful lesson to learn, as kids and as young adults, that you can think differently. And not only is it encouraged, it's celebrated. And there were, every weekend there was an art show or a dance concert or a play or something going on to showcase what came out of that. And I think both the process of going through that and being in the arts myself, but then also seeing all these other ways of making sense of being a teenager, so celebrated, was so important.
Yeah, and I think about what you were just saying about like, I think there were different circles of friends, but it never was like it's cliquey, and that's and there's the hierarchy of popularity. Like it never really, I never felt that way for me. And I think, and then I think there was a lot of people that kind of just moved in and out of different circles, whether that was based on identity of who they, like what their major was, which I think it was even less of that and more about like just who did you vibe with, but yeah, I think that it was, I don't want to say equalizer, but like almost like a normalizer, or like that we can all be passionate about different things, and find ways to connect because we're just, I think maybe that's just who that school attracted, folks that just appreciated creativity and open-mindedness in a way.
Yeah, very much so. And I remember being very proud of that at the time, because if I had gone to sort of normal high school, I don't think I would have fit in. I've never been like, I just have one group of friends and you do everything with that group of friends. And I liked that there were, without even having to change your identity, you could, check out what was going on over here with these people and check out what's going on over here with these people. And chances are they were going to work together on something at some point. And I really liked that fluidity of identity, and that it was celebrated.
Yeah, and in a way, I think it's, maybe one of the, I don't know about you, but maybe with me, it was one of the like least toxic environments that I've been in, right? Like it wasn't, yeah.
I know, whoever says that about high school.
Right. It was the culture there. So, okay. So now, right, you kind of, you talked a bit about your journey of like realizing that, it's the people, that, are the lifeblood, of organizations and of being able to solve problems and all of that. So, what lights you up about that messy humanness, in your journey, right? Because you were being in public health and like, in a nonprofit sector, and like, help me understand the thread of what brings you joy in kind of your journey.
I've always felt like I needed work to be meaningful. Even, all throughout my career, it was never just like, I just want to go to a job and get paid and come home. I felt like I needed to do something that was contributing, and that was such an important feeling for me. But I also recognized that in people that I was working with, especially in the fields that I was in, is people wanted to make a difference in some way. They really believed and had studied the subject matter of what we were doing. And it was really disheartening for me to see and hear people unhappy at work, not because of anything about the subject matter that we were working on, and not even in the face of like crazy obstacles in the real world, but because of bad relationships in the workplace. And those were often a result of miscommunication, just simple misunderstandings that were blown up, or lack of adequate like processes and channels for communication, or recognizing that people learn and process information in different ways and you need to have space for that. Sometimes there's a lack of being organized, of being really disorganized, and the frustration of trying to accomplish something when you're in a really disorganized environment and it feels like the wind is just totally blowing against you. And that was like physically painful for me. I've always been somebody that people come to vent or to ask for advice, and more I started noticing all these things that people were upset about. I could see the solution for, and not only could I see the solution for fixing it, but I could see how to mitigate it or prevent it from happening in the first place. And that's what drew me into that type of work to begin with, the systems improvement and the process stuff. But I still believe that, you can be in a job that's not that exciting, but if you feel connected to people and you feel like you're contributing and the people around you are you're all making space for each other to contribute, that's really satisfying. And to looking back at human history and even, animals, so other social animals, they do things together. They need that protection from each other. They need that stimulation from each other. And I just think people should have that. We all have to work. The vast majority of us have to work. So why not have it be a source of pride and inspiration and meaning for people?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more to that. And I think that what we're seeing now, in this whole like great resignation and, the real challenges of company culture, really, really comes down to, well, how are people feeling connected there?
Mm-hmm.
We can talk about hybrid till we're blue in the face. We could talk about, pay obviously is important. And there's a lot of inequities there and disparities. And those need to be addressed. But the core fundamental thing is like, people leave because they're not filled, they're not feeling safe or satisfied in their connections,
Mm-hmm.
So I that's why I'm so excited about this topic, because relationships are everything.
Yeah.
And to your point, that there's so much that can be actually addressed pretty easily. It's just there's no space. Like space
Mm-hmm.
has historically not been given to the human challenges of collaboration and working together.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me a little bit about when you did, like, so you were working inside of organizations and then you started your own firm, right?
Yeah, I started my own consulting company to do the similar type of work that I've been doing in-house. But if you're a consultant, if people bring you in, there's a greater chance that they're going to listen to the advice that you're giving.
Right, which, like, can we just, isn't that freaking crazy, right? That the companies are more likely to listen to the consultants that are getting paid more than the people inside. I'm just like, it's just, yeah,
It's
okay.
bonkers. It
It's
makes
bonkers.
no sense. So, I was like, you know what, I'm sick of like beating my head against a wall and saying like, here are the things that are really important to do, and being like, yeah, that's fine. Like next quarter, once we get past this big project. And that was really taking a toll on me. Yeah. And so I went out on my own and started doing that. But in the work that I was doing, I found I was trying to focus more on the sort of process side of things, but the human part kept coming back. I mean, you know, one client I was working with was a church, and they wanted a better way to do their newsletter, but everybody hated the current process. They didn't like the software that was being used. They didn't like anything about it. But when I would be like, okay, let's change this, everybody's like, no, but I do things that way. And there wasn't even the way to communicate about what each person's challenges were with that, why they preferred certain ways of doing things versus others. And just to get people comfortable enough to have that conversation took a lot of work. And this is a church where they put out a newsletter every single week, you know, 52 weeks a year, same people. And to see that be the source of so much tension between people, you know, not just between the people who are directly involved, but, you know, everybody else by, you know, hearing what was going on or getting pulled into different sides. And it just, it's heartbreaking, because that's what you go home with at the end of the day. And, you know, say, oh, Tasca didn't get her stuff done to me on time and she doesn't respect what I do. Well, maybe, but that's not very likely. More likely, like, Tasca has 1,000 other things on her plate and she doesn't realize how important this deadline is for me, because once she gets in, you know, her part in, I do X, Y, and Z with it. And so if you can just have that conversation and it shouldn't be that hard. I think once you give people the tools and you make that space where it's okay to say those things, it's not that hard. And that's what's something that's so beautiful that comes out of these game experiences, is people can say, hey, can you ask that question in a different way? Or, you know, I would approach it this way. What if we tried? It's the same thing. It's just, it feels safer when there's no high stakes, when you're in that contained game environment. But you've done it. You've practiced doing that. And now it's, what would it take to transport this experience into the workplace?
Yeah, so I just want to tie a thread for the audience that's here and that will watch after the fact, right? Which is what I'm hearing you say in your journey is that, you know, you were a problem solver for a lot of years and focused on the process piece of all of that, like the operations piece. And now you're kind of going further upstream to say, well, actually, what needs to be addressed first and foremost in order to be effective at solving these problems is actually the human connection, interaction, you know, relationship piece. Is that kind of, yeah.
And as there's all this talk, you know, the last several years, especially during the pandemic, but even before, of culture, like, you can't have a great culture until you have those other things figured out. You can have all the happy hours in the world and you can provide all of these great resources, but if people are still annoyed with each other all the time and feel like they're not recognized or they're not valued or they're misunderstood, it's not going to be a satisfying and healthy environment.
Right. It's like you need more. Now there's a time and a place for the social hours, but you need something deeper to address what's really going on below the surface. That people actually need support in order to uncover in a healthy way. And so enter gaming, not gaming, play. Gaming is a different connotation, right? But play. So I think, and when we, you know, moving into kind of this, how do we bring play into work? I know that what what you do is actually bring in play and experiential in order to unpack the relational things that are going on. But I'm also thinking about play in the broader sense of, like, for example, me putting this hat on and bringing a bit of like levity,
Absolutely,
to environments that, you know, we create a lot of maybe heightened importance around. That's, you know, maybe it's not so serious. So exactly. I love your take on these two. For you, is it about play and the game, or is it about just general levity, or is it both for you?
That's a great question. So I think that when I think about play can mean so many different things. I mean, games can mean so many different things. But I think what makes play is that it's something driven by intrinsic motivation. You're doing something because it's fun or because it lets you explore curiosity. It's not because you need to earn money or because you have to get a promotion or something. You know, it's internal. And because of that, because it's internally satisfying in some way, as you said, you let loose a little bit. You don't take yourself as seriously. You're willing to take chances a little bit more, and give over more into the experience. And something even as like, you know, something I've done to start meetings, I've been like, okay, everybody take 1 minute, go around your room and find one object that brings you joy, or like that reminds you of your greatest strength. And you know, everybody first is really curious to see what people's objects are, but then the stories that it brings out,
Mm.
and you know what it says. So like I'll ask you, like, what is that hat? What's the story behind that hat? It's an awesome hat.
No, do you really want me to answer that?
Yeah.
Okay, actually, I got this hat in Colombia when I was there in 2019 for a friend's 50th birthday, and she had gotten it for her sister, or one of her sisters had it, and I was like, I love that hat, and it just, you know, it's definitely not, you know, a style that I've worn before, but it just, I think it yeah, it just brought me a lot of joy because it was something different and it had all these textures and colors, and I think reminds me of travel, which I love so much. Like I love whether it's I'm getting a perfume from somewhere I'm traveling or a piece of art, just having that reminder of one of the things that brings me the most joy in my life is important to me.
And so even just in hearing that story from you, you know, we can tell you're adventurous. You attach a lot of meaning to experiences that you have with other people, and it's important to you to reflect on those, and you know that you collect those, and those are part of becoming who you are. And so I just learned something really valuable about you. You know, I learned in another conversation, maybe I would say, oh my gosh, look at this crazy thing I got. I know you'll appreciate this because we had this moment. And
Mm.
any type of play with other people, you're going to build on that knowledge of them and just get to know them a little bit better. And who knows what it's going to lead to down the road, whether it's, you know, maybe that hat becomes a shorthand for us for like, stop taking things so seriously. And,
Mm.
you know, a year from now, we're having a conversation and we're really in the weeds, and I could be like, crazy cowboy hat, and you're like, okay, I'll stop. That's really powerful. It became a
Mm.
symbol that means something to both of us because of a shared experience that we have. And
And
you know, that's a pretty small example, but can have a really big impact.
I love that. Yeah, and it makes me wonder, and I'm curious your perspective on this. Like, what is it about workplaces, about organizations where we like these kinds of conversations are not the norm, right? Where we aren't digging in to just understanding each other on a personal level. Like, what do you like? Why do you think that? And I know that's like a huge question, but like, I'm just curious what you think the
Yeah.
biggest barrier is right now to why this doesn't happen more.
Yeah. I listened to a really fascinating podcast that so touched on this, and it was the modern workplace was inspired by the Industrial Revolution and the idea of the assembly line and machines, and being able to say like, okay, there's this function and this function, and then this needs to happen and this needs to happen. And not only is that how like job descriptions are written, but that's also how our world sort of function. You work with the people immediately around you, and you know, you keep your information close to your chest unless you absolutely have to share it. And those are small structural components, but end up having a really outsized impact. You know, there, you don't have, your offices might not physically be close to people who do other things, so you don't meet them, or there aren't meetings where both, you know, different teams can share their how they relate to the work and what their needs are, so you just don't understand it. Or there's not, you know, the professional development is very much focused on just the individual level growth, but not the connecting elements. And I don't think they're like malicious decisions. I think it was sort of people were and continue to be really excited about technology, and it's really tempting to think like, oh, you can get humans to act like machines. But I think that's obviously not true. It's really damaging, and it has really lasting consequences. I think you need to realize that one thing that makes humans so much better than machines is our capacity for connection and creativity, and that should be nurtured rather than uh, stifled out as it has been.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love this. I'm like, oh my God, when are you doing a TED Talk? Because like this is great. This is great. So, which actually it makes me wonder when you bring play in and you're facilitating in this way and you're not having conversations directly related to write the work. Um, do you get pushback? Are people like, this is a waste of time? Like, what kind of reaction do people have? Because as you said, the norms are like it's very industrial age, like productivity driven, and something like play, right, where you said earlier it's about exploring curiosity. It's not about like actually producing in that moment. So what,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, what kind of, do you get pushback, and if so, like what do people say?
Um, we a little bit of pushback. More, it's we so do our research and how do we phrase it? So do I phrase it as play or do I phrase it as experiential learning or
Mm,
facilitated shared experiences? Because then it's not like, oh well, it's frivolous. Um,
mm,
and we actually, we've had a big debate internally over like how much do we lean into the games and play as part of our vision and mission, because some people are might be turned off by it or might be off put. But once we explain it to people, um, you know, it makes sense. You could think back to, everybody has a story of when you were playing, whether it's with friends or family members or something, and something meaningful happened. You still remember it. Something really resonated with you. And when you point that out, people are like, oh, yeah, that does kind of make sense. And the idea of having conversations that everybody knows need to happen in the workplace, but feel so unsafe
mm.
because of whatever the culture is or whatever sort of baggage the team is bringing, to create a way that you can have it where it is safe.
Mm.
People are drawn to that.
Yeah, so it's so what I'm kind of hearing is a lot of the pushback actually comes before you get in the room. It comes in the selling process of getting your clients on board to see, yeah, this is definitely valuable. And then it sounds like almost what you're doing is you're creating a whole different culture for the moment, um, for the play to explore. It's almost like, I don't know, like I'm not sure you position it that way in the facilitation of it, but it's almost like this is different, and so we can start with this with the safety net because we're setting the foundation for what it means to be in play here. Is that, am I
Mm-hmm.
following correctly? Does that?
Yeah, and we have so think of play experiences in three different levels based on the depth of outcome. So there are just a session just for the sake of people having fun and getting to know each other and spending
Mm,
time together, not related to particular tasks. We call that team bonding, and that's totally fine.
mhm.
But there wouldn't be a whole lot of guided reflection. It's going to be slightly less structured. It's really just going to be have fun, take
Right.
yourself less seriously, and see what happens. Um, and so with that, you don't really need to do pre-work with the team. There's not really an expectation that it's going to change anything other than just make people feel more comfortable with each other. And if something else comes out of it, then great. That's just a bonus at that point.
Mm,
Um, with the next level down is team building, and that's where you are playing, but you're also pairing it with specific reflective questions to draw out, how two people might have a really different experience playing the same game. It might evoke different feelings. They might recognize different strengths that they could use, or they might not like the game for different reasons. And by just highlighting the differences in how people feel, think, and act during that experience,
mm,
you're going to learn a lot. And then there are ways to directly tie that insight to the real world. So, the example I gave before, it's like, oh, now that you understand that, Tosca doesn't think your work is stupid. She just has all these other things, and she, didn't know this was such a big priority. Like, once I understand that about you, then chances are we'll work great together. But we just needed to have that conversation. Um, and so with those types of engagements, sometimes those are standalone, but sometimes they're paired with that. If you have a company that's already doing like leadership development program, or they just did the DISC assessment or something,
Mhm.
and this would be a cool way to pair it and help them apply those insights that came from another type of training or resource.
Mhm.
And then the deepest level is the team development, and that's not so much just looking at the interpersonal opportunities for growth, but looking at the team identity as a whole, and what are the strengths and what are the weaknesses and what are the fears and what are the gaps, and how do you create a culture and work environment that works for that team. And those are much more in depth and take a lot of preparation, and even the language that you use in the games that you pick, you would want to match what that team is familiar with, what they're comfortable with, so that you can get them in that mindset where they can feel comfortable and think creatively.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the distinction. And yeah, because I think a lot of people use, team building or whatever as ubiquitous, and there's depth to the work, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you said. Oh, what was the first one that you called? I missed. It was
The team
team
bonding. So it's team
bonding.
bonding, team
Right.
building, and team development.
Right. Um, so I'm curious, um, like for you, what if there's a thread like to play in your life? Like I just find it fascinating, right? But like for me, and I know in a pre-call, like we talked a little bit about like actually I'm not into games. Like I like spades, I like euchre, I'm kind of a card person, but like it stresses me out more
Mm-hmm.
than anything else to like play a game that I'm now trying to like win. So, but for you, like what role has game/play role for you? What role has it played for you? And yeah, like how does that translate into either how you're approaching this work or why it's so important for you?
Yeah, I think for me, I've always loved games, but it's games that help you spend time with other people. I've never been into video games because it doesn't encourage, you're not getting to know anything about
Mm-hmm.
people. And the idea of, how fast can you click these buttons in succession, or, go into this, imaginary world, that never appealed to me. But I mean, back to soda, spades was huge. Everyone was playing spades in the commons over lunch. And it was just a way to hang out with people, and you would play spades with people that were in totally different circles than you, and it was just like a cool way to meet other people and hear what was going on, and create inside jokes, and it was just fun to feel like, oh, we all know how to do this thing, and you could sort of do this as a way to spend time with anybody. And so the games that I've always liked have been more of, it's, even if it's a board game, it's not just like whoever moves the pieces the most, but it's how do you make that a fun shared experience, and what sort of twists can you put on it, whether it's, everybody might have slightly different rules for this game, and so how do you navigate which rule system to use, and the process of working together to figure something out. That's what I've always really liked about games and play. And there are a few conditions where I will get competitive, but for the most part, it really is just enjoying spending time with people that's, not just normal small talk. And, I've never been really into sports, so I can't just like get into a 2-hour conversation about football stats with strangers. So games are a great way to just open up a conversation with anybody.
And connect. Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, I mean it makes sense. It's like how you've connected, how you build relationships is an avenue for that. And I think that, you know, especially in these times, there's so much heaviness. There's so much like fear of doing the wrong thing and saying the wrong thing. And so I love this idea of like, if we can, it makes me think of the phrase that I kind of grew up with in sports, because I did sports as well, which was, practice like you play. So if we can practice in an environment that we know we're learning, we know we're experimenting, and it creates less pressure, I think, to get it right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, to me, it's like, well, isn't it that philosophy that we really should be embedding in the actual culture.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah, so how do you transfer then? Like, how do you then, you know, I'm assuming maybe this happens more in the team development work that you do, but how do you then transfer this environment of play into, like, how do we embed that way of being in the real world, and so we don't have to create different environments in order to feel like we can be safe and
Mm-hmm.
experiment? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what's the, and you know, hey, if this is secret sauce that, you know,
No, it's not secret sauce at all.
hire you to find out how that works, but like, yeah.
It's not secret. It's really just asking questions, you know. So we'll do a game, um, and right after say, you know, how was that for you? You know, what did you think, or what came up for you? Did you like that game? And one person will say, yeah, that game was really interesting to me. It was fun to learn the X about somebody else. And someone will say, oh, that's funny. I actually found the game a little bit stressful because there was a time pressure. And, you know, you get a few people to say things. And then you say, I'm curious, do these type of feelings, or, you know, different experiences with work show up in your work? If you're like, oh yeah,
Mm.
you know, in my role I'm really focused on deadlines, and so to me, like, of course there's going to be really tight time pressure and I'm fine with it, but maybe in your role you're not. And the conversations kind of start themselves if you
Mm.
ask the right questions. And sometimes this is where, especially if you want to do a deeper level in the team building or team development, it helps to have a professional facilitator, because they can pull out some of those insights and make some of the connections where people might not. But really, they end up starting themselves, and it's really just
Mm.
pushing them along a little bit and going into the right direction. And then you say, okay, so this tension comes up at work. It came up in the game. How did you get through it so that you successfully solved the puzzle together? It's like, well, we took some time to ask each other questions, and we started, uh, you know, a drawing that helped us diagram out what we were thinking. It's like, are there things like that that you could do in your work? And it's like, oh yeah. You know,
I love that. It's like facilitating making the connections in the environment in which it really matters. And you know, and it makes me think of, and I think I talked to you about this in our pre-call, right, which is when I went, you know, in grad school at Michigan State for my MBA, one of everybody's favorite classes was the leadership class, like the core requirement, Dr. Hollenbeck, and it was a game simulation. And like the MBA students were like the leaders, and like actually it was the undergrads that were the team that you were then directing in this, you know, like call it like war game thing. But I think what's fascinating in that environment is that you're able to see yourself more clearly almost.
mm-hmm.
I don't know why, right? Why can we see ourselves more clearly in a simulation, let's say, than in our day-to-day work?
Mm-hmm.
Is like, you know, it's almost like there's less reflection, or it's less intentional reflection. Like, I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
what do you think about that? Or maybe
No,
I mean, it's
I
just
think that's spot on. And it's funny because even when we're doing, like, you know, game simulations, and I could say this is less about getting it right than just like the experience. How are you
right.
experiencing it? Are you showing up the way you want to? And some people still get so focused on, we have to get the right answer, we have to do this really quickly, or we have to whatever. We're just, I mean, that's what we're so used to. We're not,
Mm.
you're not, there's not really an emphasis in our culture and in our education for self-awareness. A lot of people don't understand, you know, how to do that and how to make sense of it until something traumatic happens and they need to go to therapy. You know, to how to take the feelings that you're having, or the thoughts that you're having, and make sense of why they're happening and what the patterns are there. So part of it is there's just not the space for it. Part of it is a lot of people just don't know how to do it. It's hard. You have to be vulnerable. Um, and but I think that in these games, when you can make very clear, it doesn't matter how you do in this game. There's like no one's
Right.
writing anything down. Like the only meaning that it has is the meaning that you're attaching to it. And people are a little bit more willing to take time to get out of the task mindset and get into like, oh wow, I have a knot in my stomach. Why do I have this knot in my stomach? Or like, oh wow, this is giving me a lot of different ideas. What is it that's inspiring about this?
Oh my gosh, I love this because I'm going to tie it back to right, like you're talking about transforming teams, right? You're talking about relationships, and also part of what I do is like transformational coaching work, right? Which is and how do we, and transformation is repetition of trying and experimenting new ways of being, practicing. And so that when the stakes are high, when it really does matter, when somebody is counting and looking, that now you have the practice that in the heat of the moment you can do the thing that is a response and not a reaction. And of course we have something on I'm not going to go there with it, but we have something on a huge mega stage right now, right? That showcase what happens, when we're triggered, or like, right, and where the stakes are super super high for the choices that you make in relationship, let's say, right? So I just feel like the work that you're doing is so important because so much damage actually happens in our workplaces because we're not taking the time to really understand what's going on, to give space to the actual humanity that is the biggest X factor in everything, in the results and everything that gets done. And I'm curious if, I think you and I understand this. And what do you think is the key to helping more people understand that this work of practice, of experimenting, of actually what it takes to be in relationship, to actually get the work done? Like, what do you think is going to take to help more people understand that this is the critical factor, not starting with this, not the process piece, right? Not the doing of the actual output work, but the actual, the underbelly and the fundamentals of how that work gets done.
Yeah, what I've seen be really, what really reaches people is just there's a million little examples every day of us having an unintended impact on somebody else. Like, you're always going to have an impact. We go about the world, we interact with other people, we make decisions. Sometimes these are conscious decisions, sometimes they're not conscious decisions. But they're like the butterfly flapping its wings. Like, they have ripple effects on the people around us. And little decisions that we make might have a minimal impact. They could have an outsized impact, and that can be good or bad. And so there's really tangible examples. We're all on Zoom so much now. And if somebody has their camera off and they're on mute, and it's a team where people are usually pretty engaged, you might think that person doesn't care, they're tuned out. Maybe they're sick. Maybe they got an important phone call. Maybe they're eating and they don't want you to like see them chewing and like hear the crunching noises. So just somebody saying, hey, I'm going to be off for a few minutes, I'm eating, or I have to, change my kid's diaper, whatever it is. And not making room for those assumptions, just taking that small decision to like state your intention. You can prevent, what could be the start of like one rumor and another rumor, and all of a sudden this person's performance is being questioned and all these things that they have nothing to do with. So there's a million of those little things we do every day. How we phrase a question, are we phrasing it like, why did you do that? Versus, hey, can you explain to me what your thought process was behind that? It's a very different intention. It's the exact same question. And so I think just pointing out all these little things that we do all the time that we don't think about, and that can affect not just the impact on other people, but the ultimate outcome for what we're all trying to accomplish, that gets people's attention.
So, right. Okay. So you're kind of like, look, if we can break it down for people to the behavior, to say, look at what impact this has versus a different way, whether it's a different way of being or a different way of thinking about it, or what comes up for me when you say that is like, are we being generous in our assumptions, or are we going to like the worst freaking thing that could possibly be going on, like and oftentimes I think those worst things are more self-centered than anything else, right? Yeah, I love that. And I think that sometimes, yeah, making it really, really relevant to like that, like what somebody can really understand makes a lot of sense. I hope, yeah, you know, I'm just ready for you to like be a huge, massive company in no time, because I feel like what you're offering, so many people could benefit, so many organizations could benefit from that.
Yeah, and you said you were in one of our game sessions, weren't you?
Yeah, I know. And like, you know, it had been a long time since I've done something like that. Like I said, you know, back in the NBA, but you know, you know, in a way I was pleasantly surprised and reminded about my capacity to bring levity in difficult situations. Like I know that about myself, but then when I was in that, you know, because, you know, my lifestyle right now is very different, you know, the work that I do. And I'm like, oh, right. Like I know how to do that. And it was almost like a reminder to do that for myself more. Like
And
how can,
people appreciate it. People you had never met before, you know, spending an hour with you on Zoom, recognized that about you and appreciated that.
and yet I was surprised myself that that was what I chose when the game got to that, like, bah! You know, that stress peak.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's, you know, in a way, again, like it's not that dissimilar from coaching in terms of like, how are we helping people put a mirror in front and say, here's what's happening. Do you want to choose something different, you know, or not? And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's like, oh, actually, like in this case, right? It was like uh, I want to own that more and
Yeah.
bring that to the forefront more of my life. But it can also go the other way and say, ooh, I'm not proud of that moment. And
Mm-hmm.
where else am I doing that? Because there were other times in that game, I'm not saying, like, there were other times in the game where I was like, maybe I shouldn't have done that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think that the reflection work is so, you can only go so far on your own,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
and you can only go so far even with like 360 feedback from like the 2 or 3 people that are gonna like, right?
Yeah.
So
Sometimes you have to get that feedback in the moment
mhm.
and immediately be able to iterate and try something else.
Yeah. So tell me, so what's your vision? Like, first of all, like who do you love to work with? Because I just want to put that out into the universe. And like, what are you hoping like in 5 years, like that's happening with play, with your business, with the work that you want to do?
Yeah. We are trying to become so that the community, the hub for play in workplace and more experimental approach to professional development, leadership development, and culture building. You know, we partner with other companies that do this type of work rather than compete. We
Mhm.
have so 2 branches of our business. One is we're building a catalog of different types of games that anybody can just go in and the instructions are there, the reflection questions are there. So if you want to do something different in your team meeting, they're all there. Our website's barometerxp.com /deck, and that's where you get to the catalog. But then there's also, if you want to do something different with your team and bring in a professional facilitator to, you know, whether it's putting together like a leadership course that's centered around play or have a workshop on, you know, communicating about process improvement through play. You know, we have, you know, skilled facilitators with all different types of backgrounds that'll craft a customized experience, whether it's, you know, 1 hour or, you know, something over 5 weeks that get at some type of culture, interpersonal, relational dynamic that might be holding your team back or an area where you want to grow more. So we have sort of the product wing, and that's the game catalog, and then the facilitation wing.
Yeah, that's, thank you for delineating. And what I'm hearing really is like that this is a wonderful tool. These are wonderful tools in the toolbox
Yes.
for organizations that that want healthier relationships and workplace cultures. And it's kind of like, this in and of itself is awesome, and when you combine it in a bigger picture of
Yes.
what you're solving for, it's just even more powerful.
Yes, it's meant to be a tool in the toolbox that needs other tools in order to ultimately, build a new house.
Yes, I love it. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So, what? Yeah, I can't believe we're coming to
I
top of the
know.
hour already. This is crazy. What haven't we talked about that you really want people to know about either yourself, your company, or just the topic of making the case for play at work?
Oh man, I feel like we've covered so much great territory. I just want to encourage everybody to try something different. Try asking new questions that maybe don't have a lot to do with your work, but just to inspire stories. Or uh, if there's a small game that your family played on car trips, try playing it with your colleagues and see what happens. It can change the mood of a meeting. I think just bringing any type of play or fun or spontaneity in the workplace, it's rarely ever going to have a negative consequence. It's almost always going to open up a lot. So I really just want people to look for more opportunities and start to try something new.
I love that. And I think it ties to, a concept that I talk about all the time, right? Which is undoing the overdoing in a way. And that, and personally, I'll just speak for myself, right? I am super focused on well, what am I doing? Cause I'm trying to get something accomplished or do something, right? And so oftentimes I have to remind myself, oh, I can just go and do something without measurement or without an objective, just to be, and case in point is like, I signed up for a pottery thing for tomorrow night, actually, right? Because the idea is reminding myself it can be for the sake of play.
Mm-hmm.
You can do it with an intention of like, how can I learn more about somebody else, but also bringing that levity in. How do I bring play in just to bring a lightness to myself, which will then,
Who knows what it'll spark in
who
you?
knows what it will
Who
spark.
knows?
Yeah. So I think as I'm hearing you speak, I just want to invite the audience to consider play in both of these ways. Plays in just levity for the levity's sake of it, for the sake of what might open up because you're not worried about the doing actually, and then the play for the sake of like, how do I build stronger relationships in my life so that I can actually be more fulfilled and even be more effective at what I'm doing. There's so many benefits to play.
So many.
All right, when's the TED Talk? Let's do it. Come on. I'm gonna.
Yep, you can help me with it. I need your marketing whiz with language, and
There we
we'll
go.
we'll get it out there.
Yeah, with storytelling and play. No, I love it. I love it. It's been such a blessing to have you here and to have this conversation. I'm just like, I'm chomping at the bit to really like see your business grow, because I think especially in this moment of time, it's like extremely relevant, and we have to do things differently to get different results, right?
We
Like
have to.
we have to try new things, we have to experiment. Like everybody wants to, I feel like for those who are like, I just want to go back, as opposed to how do we go forward better.
Mm-hmm.
And that means getting uncomfortable with maybe trying new ways.
Yep.
And I think that's what you're offering, like a new way to be in the new future of work. Like we're here.
Yeah.
It's here.
Yep. I could not have said it any better myself.
Oh, I'm rooting you on. I'm a big fan. And I hope we get more opportunities to partner together and change the world together
Let's do it.
improve lives. So wishing you all the best. For those of you, please, how do you want people to get in touch with you that maybe want to learn more?
Yeah, so our website is barometerxp.com. You can email me. It's just alex@barometerxp.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. You see my handle here. Love to hear from anybody. Thanks.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time, Alex. Wishing you all the best in prosperity, health, and all the things that you are calling into your life right now. And I look forward to more conversations like this.
Me too, Talk. It's always great talking to you.
Thanks. Ciao for now, guys.
Bye.
Thanks to everybody for joining now and after the fact. and I'll see you next week.